Hey folks, Nathan here once again, and we're continuing our look here at my favorite deck building games here, in conjunction with some of the stuff talked about various card games and such on Cloud City Casino over at StarWarsReport.com. This is part 4 of our look at Ascension, and this time we're taking a look at the third block, which is the last time that they actually released things throughout a year in a block format of one large and then one small set. After this block, it'll just be large sets going forward. This set in question is Rise of Vigil. This will be followed up momentarily with Darkness Unleashed. Now, as I mentioned in the past, you don't tend to see different features going from one block to the next. The exception to that would be things like the Unite keyword or the Fate part of certain cards. But by and large, you're not going to see things carry over. So as we move from Immortal Heroes and the block that adds Storm of Souls and Immortal Heroes in it into Rise of Vigil, you notice that the Soul Gem cards are completely gone. They existed only in Immortal Heroes. Along with that, the events are also gone. With the events gone, so go the event trophies, which means that so does the Fanatic. So one of our always available cards is now gone, and we're back to the Mystic, Heavy Infantry, and Cultist over here as normal. So in a way, we've sort of reset things. A lot of the new things that were added back in the previous block are gone, and this block is going to add some more into the mix. In essence, this block is focused around the idea of energy and energizing, which are a new mechanic with a new currency, so to speak, a new number to keep track of throughout any given turn. First, let's check out the game board. We've got our standard setup here of our 6 cards there in the center row. We've got our center row deck, or portal deck as it's sometimes called. We have a spot for the Void for those banished creatures and whatnot. We have our always available cards, Mystics, Heavy Infantry, and Cultists. And of course we have cards for our starting deck. But we have more than just that, and we have some changes that have taken place. You'll notice first that art has changed again. So for this new block, we have a new look for the Apprentice. We have a new look for Militia, we have a new look for Mystic, and we have a new look for Heavy Infantry. In general, the Cultist doesn't wind up getting new looks, but he has his quote changed on the card. Now, for the first time since the game began 4 sets ago, we actually have a change occurring here to the starting decks. Instead of it just being 8 Apprentices and 2 Militia per player, now there's also one of these cards, what's called an Energy Shard, added into the mix. An Energy Shard card is called a treasure card. We'll get to that here momentarily. And when you play it, you get to draw a card, and you get energy +1, or an energize +1. We'll get to what that means momentarily. But basically, you have a new starting card in your deck, same backs and everything, so your starting deck is now 11 cards instead of 10. Now there's also another version of these Energy Shard cards, very similar here in design, right? Same art and same name. This is another type of these treasure cards, but these are going to actually be inside your center deck as you play. Again, giving you the ability to draw 1 card, energize +1. It does have a 0 amount here as far as honor points go, which is the same as any of the starting cards are. You've got your little flavor quote there, and a little indicator there indicating that it's treasure. That's that little red oval there on either side. It looks kind of like a gem. But you have energy shards, 1 per starting deck now, plus you have these that are going to be in the center row. Now, how many energy shards you're going to add to your center deck completely depends on how many sets you're playing with. In theory, if you're only playing with 1 large set, you should have 30 of them. 1 small set is 20. And then for every multiple of that you combine together, then you'll add more. So for instance, if I played with this large set and then another small set, I'd have 50, 30 from the large, 20 from the small, to have an adequate amount of energy shards inside the center deck. Now speaking of these energy shards, again, they are treasure cards. When you flip one of these out from the center deck to fill an open spot on the center row, you stop, and then you just flip out another one. So a treasure card is not going to sit there as the card in the center row. It'll be more like what happened here or here. Energy shard got flipped out, then something else flips out on top of it. Whoever winds up acquiring or defeating the card that's on top of it takes all the treasure cards that are underneath, no matter how many there are. There is no limit. The energy and energizing works a little bit different, though, than the stats we're used to keeping track of. Whenever we're trying to acquire things, we're playing with runes. We just play a certain number of cards, gain a certain number of runes, and as we acquire something, we spend them. So if I had 6 runes and I acquired Truth Seeker, then I'm down to 2, because it costs 4. Or if I had 6 runes and I wanted to acquire Magnet Monk for 3 and get that energy shard that's underneath it to add to my deck, then I'd spend 3, now I'm down to only 3 left. Same thing worked with power. I played the power cards, I build up a certain amount of power. Anytime I want to defeat an enemy, I spend the power, it's gone, but the enemy's defeated. So if I have 6 power, I decide to defeat Serpent Siren for 2, I knock out Serpent Siren and get its reward, I get the energy shard underneath it for my deck, and I still have 4 power left because it only costs 2 out of my 6, and so on and so on. Energize is more like a threshold to meet. It doesn't get spent so much as just gets built. It's like gathering energy into the battle area. So let's say I play 2 energy shards, and that winds up giving me +1 and then +1 again for 2 energy. I have energized by 2. Well, let's say then that I pull out Ulu, Ascara Prince. Down here in this blue section it says energized 2. Copy the chosen effect an additional time. Because the main one is copy the effect of a hero played this turn, the effect cannot be copied. Okay? So I play this and I normally get the main text, but because I've energized by at least 2, I'm able to get this extra thing. But, so let's say on the same turn, I go after Raging Ursine, take it out for 3. Reward, gain 3 honor. But again, I've energized at least 2. Doesn't matter that I've already used it. I've energized at least 2, I've got that threshold met, so I'm going to gain 2 runes. It doesn't matter how many times you use it, the amount doesn't decrease on that turn. You build up a threshold, and you can do whatever you want with your energize abilities as long as it's that number or less. Sometimes this can actually help you beyond a specific number. For instance, Deviant Fiend here, if I defeat him for 5 power, my main reward is gain 3 honor, but energize. Gain an additional 1 honor for each energy you have gained this turn. So regardless of how much it is, I get that much honor. If I've energized 5, booyah, I've got 5 extra honor. So energize is the big new mechanic, but it's done using those energy shards that are in the new, slightly expanded starting decks and inside the center deck. But again, it's different than anything we've seen in this game before because it's a threshold to meet, not a currency to spend. As for spending, what do you get for your money when you pick up Rise of Vigil? You get the game board, you get 25 of each size of honor token, right? So 25 of the ones worth 1 that are the small clear ones, 25 of the large red ones worth 5. You have 259 cards, 4 personal starting decks, each containing 8 apprentices, 2 militia cards, and 1 energy shard, which are these here. 53 always available cards, that's 1 cultist and 26 mystics, along with 26 heavy infantry, as we see over there off to the side. 100 regular center deck cards, and 60 energy shards, including 2 extra starting energy cards, which you'll have here, and the 2 extra starting stack there, just in case you're playing a 6-player game with another set mixed in. They wanted to make sure you had enough energy shards to give all 6 players, which is supposed to be the maximum, enough energy shards for their starting decks. Personally, I really like the Energize effect, but it's a lot like Soul Gems or the events back in the previous block. If you're not playing within this block, and you have a whole bunch of sets combined together, you're not necessarily going to see energy shards coming up as often as you would probably like, or cards using Energize as often as you would probably like. Thankfully, this at least somewhat balances it out by saying that for every large set, add in 30 energy shards, and for every small set, add in 20, which works great for the digital game because you've actually got those that can digitally add in, but eventually you're going to run out of those cards if you're playing with real physical sets as you're trying to combine enough energy shards for all the sets you're combining together. This is another one I would recommend playing as a block unto itself, because it plays really well that way, but it does get kind of diluted as you try to add in sets from other blocks. That brings us to the second set of this block, which is the last of the small sets, which is Darkness Unleashed. Noted as an expansion for Ascension, Rise of Vigil, so you know which one it works best with. Now it has its own set of game rules, but again, just like with Immortal Heroes, it just lays out the information on what's new rather than what is the rule for the entire game. If you're just playing with this set, you wind up having to go online to get your information, and you'll notice there is no game board. It's another reason I wasn't a big fan of these small sets. They just didn't feel complete. As for what you have in it, you have 30 different honor tokens, 15 of each type. You've got 196 cards total, not, I guess, counting the little notifications, the notification about how certain things are going to work with energy shards and transformations, which is something new here. But you have 2 personal starting decks that each have 8 apprentices, 2 militia, and 1 energy shard. So same setup as we had last time, just for 2 players instead of 4. You have 33 always available cards, 1 cultist, and 16 each of mystics and heavy infantry. Again, all the designs being the same designs that we saw back in Rise of Vigil, that third year or third block design for the common cards that we see all the time. And then 65 regular center deck cards. We'll look at those here in a moment. Along with 50 treasure cards, 40 of which are regular energy shards, and 10 of which are a new type called dark energy shards, which we'll look at. And then 26 single-sided, what are referred to as transform cards. You'd be like, wait a second, what the heck is he talking about when it comes to these? Of your 65 center deck cards, you've also got transform cards, either 26 single-sided or 13 double-sided. What on earth do I mean? Let me flip that close there. Yes, I was cheating, taking a look at that list. Basically what they've added here are dark energy shards and the ability to transform. So let's talk transform first. The idea is that when a certain character energizes to a certain level, when you've raised the energy threshold to a point where a character can energize and use a certain ability, there are some that instead of having their energize ability on the bottom, will, like Jacob Cobra Shaman, have their energize ability listed first. So if I've energized to level 4 or above, the first thing I do when this card comes out is energize 4. Transform this into Jacob, Cobra King. Ignore the rest of this card's effect. So instead of laying this card out and keeping it for future turns, he gets replaced with this card here, which has a special look to it. Notice the card frame looks quite a bit different. And this one, this transformed Lifebound hero, allows you to gain 6 honor, and when you gain honor from another card this turn, gain twice that much honor instead. And it's worth 5 honor for your final total, whereas the original was just worth 3 and gains 3 honor when you play it. So we have basically Jacob transforming into a more powerful version of himself. Now, both of these are regular cards. You're going to take these transform versions and just sit them off to the side, not actually putting them into the center deck. It'll be the regular starting ones that go in your center deck, and when you need to transform it, you just pull this one from off to the side and play with it. But some people do like to play instead with card sleeves. And if you're playing with card sleeves, you would use this other stack of them, and it's 2-sided. So you have this in there with the sleeve on that side, and then when it's time to transform, pull it out of the sleeve, flip it over, slip it back in, and now the sleeve is facing that side, and you're able to read the transformed version of it. Very cool, I think, that they gave us 2 different versions of each. So all 13 of the different cards that can transform, you've got either a double-sided version you can play with, or you've got a regular one and one of the transform ones you can sit aside that have a regular card back to them. I think that's a pretty cool and relatively player-friendly way of doing it. They do have to give you a note, though, on this other card over here, just to remind you not to do anything untoward. Do not use both sets of transform cards. The single-sided transform cards can be used instead of the double-sided transform cards. See rulebook for more details. Then you have your information there on extra energy shards and how many to use, as I noted last time. Speaking of energy shards, we do have a new type here. Also a treasure card, noted by the little gems up there and the fact that it says treasure, which also, just like a regular energy shard, when you play it, give you an energize by 1 or +1 to your energy and allows you to draw a card that's also worth nothing to your final honor total, but which, unlike the original energy shard, or the ones in your starter, these, if you'll pardon me smacking the tripod there, these have a fate effect. So the only difference is when you pull this out of the center deck and stick it in the center row, right before you draw another card to lay on top of it, you'll have the fate action of each player may banish a card in their discard pile. That's it. That's all there is to it. And there's 10 of them. And the idea is that whatever amount you are supposed to have of energy shards inside your center row deck, so 30 for every big set, 20 for every small set, you still use those numbers, but 10 of those energy shards that would normally have been these in Rise of Vigil, you're going to replace with 10 of those dark energy shards. It adds a new dynamic to energy shards coming out, but honestly, not one that means a whole hell of a lot. So generally, dark energy shards, having them in the game was a bit of a non-issue. They're just not all that special, don't affect the gameplay enough to really be all that noteworthy. But transform cards, that was something that was really cool that they added here based on the energize mechanic. But energy shards will be gone by the next set. It's unique to this third block. Thankfully, they did decide to keep that transform feature and came up with another way to do transformations later that has nothing to do with energizing. So it's a cool block. The transform feature is really neat. Having the energy shards added in gives us a new way to deal with a currency, I guess you could call it, because we're looking at a threshold rather than something that we spend. But by and large, not something that dramatically changes the gameplay. Just adds a few cool little new nuances to it, some of which will be carried over in the future. For now, we'll wrap up this episode. Next time, we'll take a look at Realms Unraveled and Dawn of Champions.